I'm Dane Rose, and this is a map of the domain of integrity, exploring some of the geometry, the mathematics, the principles, and the implications, as well as the arenas in which to explore integrity. So, the first thing is to look at the root word, which is to integrate. And I've drawn this thread-like image, or this tree-like image, because one of the deepest truths or maxims is divide and conquer. Unify or integrate and withstand. So if someone divides us, they can conquer us. And one of the ways to look at this is imagine that all of your force is going directly forward. So you've got 100 units of force going forward. That is a powerful momentum, and that's going to be very difficult to stop. But now imagine that rather than going forward, you take 50 units and you evenly divide it. And now you've got 50 units pulling to the right and 50 units pulling to the left. Well, what you get is a complete standstill. So you've got very powerful force going forward, and then you've got a standstill when that same force is equally divided and pushed in different directions. Now, once an environment or a person succeeds in equally dividing us as individuals, such that 50% of our energy is going to the right and 50% of the energy is to the left, these cancel each other out. And it is as if, from a momentum point of view, we don't exist. Because our momentum is always determined by the majority vote. If you have a set of brakes in a car and you have an accelerator and you push them both on, the net momentum forward is determined by the force of the braking in tension with the force of the accelerating. And whichever one is stronger will determine whether the car stays still, goes forward, or goes backward at different speeds. So we're looking at the net. In a company dynamic, you have the profit you have the revenue coming in, then you have the expenses going out. These are not lined up. You have, profit, gross income comes in, expenses go out, and then there's this net remainder. And you can, have $1 billion in revenue. But if you have $1.001 billion of expense, or an exact $1 billion of expense, you made absolutely no money. There's no profit. There's no net remainder. If you have 50 units going off to the right and 50 units going off to the left, you don't move at all. Now, it's unusual for force to be balanced that finitely, and maybe the native environment has a slight slope to it. And so if you have true 50-50, you'll tend to drift downhill, particularly if you think of the dynamic of a wheel, a bicycle. But if you've got a little bit of slope also, if the downhill side is maybe 55% of you is for going uphill and 45% of you is for going downhill, and there's a little bit of a slope, you may still come to stasis. I really want to do this, but I'm really scared of doing this. I really want to do this, but I don't want to deal with the responsibility of doing this. I really don't want to be rejected, but I'd really like the date. Oh, it'd be terrible to be rejected, but I really want the date. There is enormous pressure. There's enormous force in play, but it's canceling itself out. And this is what makes us profoundly vulnerable to outside influence. When we are divided inside, it takes very little energy on the outside to topple us over or to determine our lives. So this is one of the prices of a disintegrated life. This is integrated. This is disintegrated. When we're balanced in our disintegration, what do I do? What do I do? And that's this element of chance or, luck. You have people say, I had no idea what to do. And then this homeless person said, go there. And that's what determined my life. One comment from a homeless person, or my mother said this, and, I was divided. So I just did what my mother said, and my life was ruined. Or my life was benefited. But it's not self-referencing. So this is the first thing to understand about the difference between integration and disintegration, strength and weakness. Now, to really map this out thoroughly, we have to look at a certain amount of paradox and a certain amount of complexity. Because there's nothing worse than being 100% integrated in the wrong direction. There's nothing worse than bottling down the street at 150 miles per hour into a hairpin turn with another car coming. You've got integrity. There's no braking. You're going forward at all cylinders, and you're dead because you didn't temper that speed. You didn't balance that forward momentum with it could be a variety of things you can temper it with, because everyone wants to get where they're going. So gun the engine. But the tempering force is, okay, could I slow down? This is a school zone. What if a 6-year-old came out here? Do I have the ability to control this vehicle? What if another car came around here? What if the street was a little slippery? I don't know this road today in this rainy weather, so I'm going to slow down. I'm going to temper the single-minded integrity. Bill Gates is single-handedly responsible for a lot of the thrust in Microsoft's size, if you read some of the early biographies. And he was driven, and he was terrified. He was terrified that Microsoft would go out of business, be acquired, and fail. And one of the reasons Microsoft has been so successful is that it generally has kept a very large cash war chest of, even a decade ago or so, it had $30 billion in the bank to weather volatility, to buy up competitors, to face legal threats, to buy back stock, to do a variety of things, because Gates was scared. Because he knew enough from reading biographies and studying the markets to understand how uncommon it was for a market leader to hold its leadership position in a rapidly changing market. So he was, really driven. And I worked for some of the early Microsoft employees as a contractor. And, they talked about burnout, health crisis, because people couldn't keep up with Gates's fear fear of missing out on an opportunity, fear of this happening and that happening. And so that driven nature has a cost and it has a reward. And so that's one of the first things to look at when we're looking at integrity, is integrity with what? Because 100% accelerator and no brakes is the fastest car around. But does it take you in the long run where you want to go, i.e., having a long racing career? So what we're doing here is exploring the language and the geography and the geometry of integrity. And we're doing this, of course, because people like to go around pronouncing that person has integrity and that person doesn't have integrity. And it's not always clear what they mean about that. And what I hope is by the end of this, that you'll be able to nuance in and understand what someone means when they say those words, what you mean when you say those words, and be able to help someone follow along the track to understand what they mean when they say the word integrity or what you mean. Because it is one of the fundamental principles and forces in every aspect of our life. I mean, this is being filmed because of a lot of integrity. The battery has got to hold together. The lens has got to hold together. The software has got to hold together. My hands have to keep moving. The lights have to stay on. The microphone has to keep working. There's a lot of integrated components that have to have integrity, and they have to form a synergy, and the synergy has got to have integrity. It's not just the microphone, it's the wiring and the plug, and the electricity has got to have a continuous circuit, which when you have damp environments, for example, my microphone jack in Thailand kept failing on my iPad after it'd be like every 3 weeks. You'd start hearing static on the external microphone because the humidity in the Thai air would corrode the microphone jack inside the iPad. And I'd have to rub it off with alcohol and replug in the microphone, or have hours of recording be completely faulty. And so there's so many things that need integrity. And yet, as we've already seen, integrity with what? And that's ultimately where all of this is leading. Integrity with what? Integrity with the goal of being as fast as possible, kill as many people along the way as... integrity with the goal of having $1 million, screw your family or whatever. Integrity with your health, screw your business. Integrity with what? So there's also, we're going to look at some of the domains in which integrity occurs. And you can kind of see each of these as strands. Because if you want to take a really big rope like this, and you can try this, you can take any big rope and try and break it. And most ropes that are at least this size are going to require anywhere from 500 pounds to 20,000 pounds before you can break that rope. So you can't do it as an individual. But what you can do is you can cut the rope or go to the end of the rope, and you can unthread it until you have lots of small strands, and get down to the smallest possible strand. And if the smallest possible strand is 60 pounds or 80 pounds, then you're going to be able to divide the strands and pull one, and then pull another, and 20 minutes later, you've cut through a 20,000 pound rope, just 60 to 80 pounds at a time with your bare hands. That's the power of divide and conquer. Now, you can do the same thing in politics. You can do the same thing in any group. And most importantly, you can do the same thing in yourself. You can enter an environment that splits you down the middle, where half of you wants this and half of you wants that, and neither of you gets what you want because you're pulling in a tug-of-war of different directions. You've got one body. Now, it gets more complicated, though, because, it's easy to visualize full-on go forward and pulling in opposite directions. But the truth is, the psyche, you and I, are a lot more complex than just one direction. There's a lot more voices in there that say, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And so a much more accurate depiction is not just forward or sideways. And there's not just two players. When you look at the conversations and the inner dialogues that we tend to have, particularly if you have a complex mind, it's much more circular, but the exact same principle applies. In other words, let's take a decision like going on a vacation. The part of us that wants to get healthy and realizes we're sick says yes. The part of us that can't pay for health insurance because we're not making enough money because we're taking another vacation says no. On the same issue. It's like we've got to have health insurance, and that means more work in a job that we hate, and we've got to take a vacation to get away from that job that we have. And you've got both parts pulling in the opposite direction for the same value of health. And then you think around the vacation again. Well, I'd like to go to Mexico because of this and this and this, and it's nearby and it's cheaper and this and this. And I'd like to go to Thailand for this and this and this because this is, and where do you go? And then I'd really like to see so-and-so who's in Thailand, but I don't want to see the person that hangs out with them. And they're in Thailand too. So, and I can't divide the two of them. So, I want to see you, but I don't want to see you, and you're both neighbors. So, I'm divided there. And then you look at this other thing where, it would be mentally stimulating to go, to Thailand because it's such a different culture. And on the other hand, most people don't speak English there, and so, you can't talk about it as much. And so what I'm getting at is whichever dimension you look at, you can look at health, you can look at money, you can look at physical beauty, you can look at food, you can look at a variety of things, and it's possible to construct a situation or a choice where you are pulled apart in every single direction, where no matter which way you choose, half of you is not going to be happy. And so so if you have just those two choices, half of you will be unhappy regardless of what you do. And this is very important to understand in relationship dynamics. Like one of the things that I pay a lot of attention to with a partner is how integrated they are. Because let's say you're going out on a date with someone who feels hurt if you don't pursue them, but they feel overwhelmed if you do pursue them. Because the part of them that's looking at social ranking says that if I was hot, they'd be pursuing me. And I want to be hot because I gain social rank. But then there's another part of them that's saying, well, I don't know what to say and I get overwhelmed when anyone pursues me, so I don't want them to pursue me because I don't want to be overwhelmed. So I don't want to be overwhelmed, and that means someone can't pursue me. But I want to have social status, and that means I need to be hot. And how can I be hot? Or what evidence would I have? I mean, how can I say I'm so hot they didn't pursue me? It's like, you can't brag to your girlfriends about that. So there's no way to win there. You're either overwhelming them or, they're mad because, why didn't you pursue me and this and that and the other. And so this is what's called having mixed signals, sending mixed messages. Absolutely. You're picking up on the body. Oh my gosh, I don't know how to do it. So you back off. And then they're like, well, wasn't I worth pursuing? It's a different part of them. So this is where you get into, into trouble, is when you try and get a singular message, because these are two different parts with two different agendas. So let's start looking at some of the domains that can be integrated. And so these are the little threads that can either come together or can be different. And obviously, if 85% of a rope is pointing this way and there's a few stray threads going off that way, the rope is going to have the greatest strength and integrity, and the person is going to go forward where there's that strongest convergence of different voices. So one of the aspects of integrity, and this is more of a principle or a variable, is independence. And here's what I mean by that. If you're independently wealthy and you've got all the sex you want and you're able to defend yourself from harm and you're able to provide for your basic human needs, you can survive, you feel secure in that survival, you have a sense of love and belonging, you have a sense of self-esteem, you like yourself, you're developing as a human being, and you don't need anyone's approval to continue on that path. You're going to have more integrity with yourself than the alternative situation. You're 6 years old. You depend on your mother and father to survive, to feel secure, for a sense of love and belonging. So you depend on them. But you also depend on a variety of other peoples. At 6 years old, you're surrounded by adults, any one of which could kill you. Any one of which could, perhaps if they have political power or a dominance hierarchy in relationship to your parents. I mean, we have situations, for example, where the Catholic Church, which, if you watch Mea Culpa Maxima, has been in a conspiracy to rotate pedophilic priests. So as soon as a certain number of complaints from parents and press reaches around a certain pastor, they'd take them on a retreat where they'd hang out with other pedophilic priests, learn the trade and all that. And then they would send the exact same people back into parishes where they had a clean track record to protect the pedophilic behavior of the priests, and to and the church would engage in silencing, in bribery, in a whole variety of things, but not protect the child. And the Catholic Church, with billions of dollars, is in a high-ranking position. When you've got political ears, when you've got billions of dollars, and when you're operating under the supposed weight of God, when they say these parents don't know what they're talking about, and everyone else thinks if they don't pay attention to the priest, they're going to go to hell, that's not an even playing field. And so you have actual, ongoing scenarios where parents, afraid of the repercussions in the culture from challenging sexual abuse of their children actually enable the abuse and tell their children to be quiet. Well, why? I mean, if the parents had billions and had the same social and political ranking, and if the children had billions and had the same sizes, that abuse would stop in a heartbeat. Or if the Catholic Church, of course, was ethical and focused on protecting their children as opposed to enabling their priests, that would stop like that. But when you have a lack of independence, you depend on the priest for salvation. You depend on the priest for, absolution in the Catholic framework. If you depend on other parishioners for your money, meaning half of the church comes to your shoe shop, and if you get out of, if you have a rupture with the church, half of your customers will go away and you're barely able to hang on to rent. Now, the truth becomes politicized because of an imbalance in need. You see, the church, with its billions, can survive, but your shoe shop cannot. You've got an imbalance of power there. The degree to which you will be able to uneditedly express all your thoughts, all of your feelings, and do what you believe is the right thing to do. Now, when I say what you believe to be the right thing to do, some people believe that if you've got the power, you get to dominate everyone else, that's just the way it works. They learned that from abusive parents, and they grow up seeing abusive governments dominating in a variety of ways. They see their police dominating and bullying. And so it's basically they've learned the code that if you have the power, you can dominate and bully everyone else. And so if they have power, they will do what they think is right, which is dominating and bullying those that don't have any power, passing the program along. But if they have a sense of ethics, whatever that is, it could be might is right. That's a very crude ethic that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years. It could be it's the responsibility of the weak to protect the strong, as in serfdom. It could be the belief that it's the responsibility of the strong to protect the weak. That what makes a king, in the truest sense, is how well he protects those most vulnerable in the country. Will the king go out with their military and their authority and stop the next country from invading the farmers who can't defend themselves? That's what makes a king, and that's what creates the bowing and the loyalty, is that the king will lay down his life and his money and his troops to protect the integrity of the most vulnerable people of their culture to live and grow their crops without being molested. So whatever you think is the right way of doing things, that's what you move towards when you have independence. And it's lovely to see. There's not that many people who have and feel the kind of independence that Elon Musk has. So he's on 60 Minutes and, well, what do you say about this and what do you say about that? And he's like, I'm not really trying to fit the mold of what other company leaders are doing. I have a mission. I want to make the the species interplanetary. I want to facilitate sustainable energy. We're doing good at that. And, I do stuff in my own way. And, as a billionaire with a success record who is highly respected by some of the smartest and most conscientious people on the planet, he has that independence. It's not full. He's vulnerable to the shorts who are constantly trying to pull Tesla stock down. And his caring for other shareholders, etc., tempers some of that. It's not complete independence. It's one of the reasons he wanted to take Tesla private recently. And so I'm talking in 2019. So that's, but still, you'll hear honest candor from Elon that you won't find in 99% of the CEOs out there, because they don't have that independence. The board could vote them off. Their position is weak. So their biggest focus is not to say anything controversial, however true. Well, you can't lead from that position. And so that's the role of independence. And so to the degree that you make yourself independent is to the degree that you can be more honest. And this is one of the reasons why it's not usually that great to, for example, work for your dad. Because when your dad, has the need to protect certain family secrets, to deny certain dynamics, to protect certain things of their own, and they have the power of your income, then there's an intimidation factor. Whereas if you have your own private and independent source of meeting your human needs, you will be able to be more honest in that family dynamic than if all someone has to do is snap a finger and your livelihood disappears. And so that's one of the reasons why, even in genetics, when you breed outside the family, there's a stronger genetic framework than when you breed within the family. You're building the complexity of the ecology, of the network, so that you've got redundancy. Nature is also very good at that with the biodiversity of plants. So, for example, human beings created the Irish potato famine. They grew millions and millions of one type of potato in a monocrop. All it took was a certain blight, and the entire food source of Ireland was wiped out. You had a famine. Well, nature doesn't do it that way. It has an independent network where it's very unusual within nature to be in any domain that's naturally developed that doesn't have at least 100 species. Well, of course, we had learned from nature, and there were 100 different vegetables all divided up over Ireland, and one of them had a blight, like a certain variety of potato, it wouldn't have affected, there would be no famine. So, human beings tend to put all their eggs in one basket. So in the United States now, we have, thousands of acres of one varietal of corn. It's just waiting for that same kind of blight to happen. And so what we do is we attack nature. We put increasing amounts of chemicals on so that they can't attack the vulnerability of that design. We destroy the whole ecology to protect an unsustainable practice of monocropping. And then we pay the price, of course, in various health defects and things like that. So this is independence. Diversity of support, independence support, and it's one of the variables. Now, skills are another variable, and they tie in with independence because you have to learn certain skills to be independent. You can't just, be a 2-year-old and say, I'm independent. No, you've got to learn to walk. You've got to learn to drive. You've got to learn to understand the language. You've got to learn to make a good impression. You've got to learn to write a resume. You've got to learn to start a company, to open a bank account, to deal with passports. You've got to do all that before you can be independent. But one of the variables in this is, do your skills line up with things like your goals, your values, etc.? Now, another is work. And we'll see, how this ties in with others of the variables, because what the strongest rope is where every one of these is closely woven into the other. So, for example, if your ideal is world peace and you're working for a defense contractor, unless you've got a clever bit of mental software that says that the world is more peaceful because I'm making nuclear missiles, and some people do. They say that there probably would have been World War III by now, except that there were nuclear missiles and nobody wanted to get that started because everyone loses. And so, you can develop a bit of software that says building nuclear missiles is the best way to create world peace. But if you don't see it that way, then you're at work building nuclear missiles and then you're at home meditating for peace. You're not at peace with yourself in those two roles. Dreams. Dreams are, and I'm talking both. Well, let's look at both. So dreams, visions of where you'd like to be in 5 or 10 years. This ties in, of course, with skills and independence, where the more independent you are, the more likely you are to follow those dreams, particularly if they're risky and break with the herd. Secondly, are you learning the skills that would allow you to follow your dream? If you have a dream of sailing around the world on a boat and you don't know how to swim and you're not connecting the dots, it's like it's a much stronger dream if you say, okay, in 10 years I'm going to sail around the world. This year I'm going to learn how to swim really well. Next year I'm going to get a little boat. Next year I'm going to build a boat. The next year after that, I'm going to learn to cook and do emergency medical repair because we're not going to have a big crew. And then I'm going to learn all about the safety zones and the currents. And so you can say that has integrity, that dream. Meaning it's not, I'm going to sail around the world. I don't know how to swim. I don't have a boat. I don't have any money for a boat. They're not going in the same direction. You also have night dreams, of course. But this is also things, for example, my wife is sensitive and she's also a bit shy. And so one of the things I learned is that our relationship improves if I assume that every character in her dreams are part of the dynamic between us. And and so I'll say things like, well, okay, so she'll describe the characters and the dynamic, and I'll say, oh, so which one is me and which one is you? And okay, and we'll talk about it. And often, if we can figure out what's going on, there'll be a message in that dream. Now, if I listen to that message and say, okay, that's what we're going to do today, we're going to respond to that, then there's a sense of integrity. And the relationship grows stronger because the right hemisphere, the more intuitive part of her brain, is speaking less directly, something that, my wife is conflict avoidant and I can be bossy. So if she just confronts me directly and says, Dane, it's got to be like this, I may push back, say, no, it's got to be like this. Well, she doesn't enjoy that. So she doesn't speak up that way. But in her dreams, she may say, there may be a picture of this and this and this. And I'll say, okay, I think we should adjust the relationship this way based on your dream, and things will work a lot better. And synchronicity and attunement and stuff like that falls into that domain. In a bizarre example earlier today where, words all lined up in a message, just random words. And it's like, what are the odds that those words would come together in a relevant message? It's about 1,000,000 to 1, and they just piece together. It's like, wow, that spells a sentence. Does it make sense? Seems relevant? Okay, let's act on it. And when those things are integrated, with logic and reason, with boundaries, with intelligence, in context, you can strengthen the integrity. Now, talent and skills are different. Your talent is like a gift. There's some people that, like Mozart, they can hear and see music. That's a talent. Now, if they don't learn to play the piano, that talent will be latent. If they don't learn how to write music, the talent will be latent. So one of the areas to look for integrity is, for example, particularly in a Western culture where the predominant schedule, I mean, if you look at the amount of minutes in a person's life and look at how many minutes were spent preparing for work, applying to work, driving to and from work, and working, it's going to be one of the biggest items in minutes in your entire life. Studying to work. You know, supposedly this 18 years of studying to learn to work. And so you want to try and integrate your talent with your skill. Because if you're Mozart, but you don't learn to play the piano, you don't learn to play the violin, you don't learn to compose, what you learn is the skill of cutting wood. You may be a decent woodcutter, but there's going to be part of your soul, part of your potential that's waiting there that would make you so much stronger. And one of the reasons, of course, is when talent and skill come together, you get the phenomena of being in the zone. You get the phenomena of excellence. And within the Pareto curve, what we see is that the top 1% of 1%, like look at it in income terms, the top 1% of 1% has something like, a third of all the money in the world. You know, and it's disproportionate. Well, one of the things, Buffett talks about this he says, I'm so lucky to be born in America when I was. Why? Well, Buffett has a talent for analyzing patterns and numbers. And that's a talent to see patterns like that clearly. And he also has a talent for discipline, for just being very dissociated in a certain sense from emotions around this. And, fear and greed are the investor's biggest bane. And so, but he points out, because he's not very athletic, he's not very sociable, he's, not particularly happy, or, and he wouldn't make a particularly great carpenter or anything like that. So if Warren Buffett was born in the 15th century, or born in, Papua New Guinea or something, or some place, where numbers and investing is not a big deal, or born under a kingship where he wouldn't be allowed to be independently wealthy, where he'd be forced to do things another person's way at their whim, he'd be a nobody. He might be dead. Because what if he was a hunter and he was not a particularly good coordinated hunter, so he's dead. But it's the particular combination of a skill, of a talent, in an environment where that combination is highly valued. We call ourselves not humanists, not spiritualists, not well-beingists, not healthists. We don't call ourselves any number of things that we could easily call ourselves. We call ourselves capitalists because money is at the top of the food chain. It's the highest deity within the United States. We don't have a Fortune 500 goodness list, the goodest people. We don't have the kindest people. We don't have the healthiest people. We don't have the most intelligent people. We have lists of the richest people, and we track that with great interest. And we're fascinated. It's like, oh, you've got $1 billion. I want to hear your views about movies. You have $1? I don't care. You're a nobody. You're a nobody on the metric of money, and that's the primary metric within our cult. So when Buffett's skills and talents intersect with a legal framework that lets him be independent, and intersect in a time and in a cultural hierarchical system where he's good at doing the thing that makes people more money than any other thing, which is turning money into more money. Suddenly, he's a god. Suddenly, his social awkwardness is eccentric. Suddenly, everyone wants him on TV. He doesn't have the best speaking voice. He doesn't have the handsomest face. He's good in a context. And this is a very important thing to learn, because if you can move yourself into context, one of the reasons I went to Thailand was that what I'm best at doing is 10 times more appreciated and easy over there. A lot of things. And so over there, I'm highly successful. And it would be a little bit, like if Buffett was traveling back and forth in time or back and forth in location. He's the Wizard of Omaha in the United States in our century. 500 years ago, he's a slave or someone, being kicked for not working and plowing the field hard enough. And an absolute nobody in that culture, because in that culture, all that mattered was animal intelligence to manage the flock. When you're dissociative, part of childhood trauma, when you're dissociative, you often get very good at numbers and terrible with living beings. So Buffett can walk over his own son, who's crying and bleeding on the stair, without noticing him. And he'll go in to do his standard routine and do one of the best jobs in the world, moving numbers. That doesn't work when you're on a farm. And so it's a very important aspect of integrity. And it's why I have environment up here. If you're the best of the world at something that everyone hates in this place, to have integrity, you've got to move yourself or create an environment in which everyone honors and loves that talent, that skill that you're good at. You've got to create, let's say you're the best body piercer. You can create the most amazing images in every face you see. You see all these possibilities for tattoos and piercing and all that. Well, if you're in the Gothic crowd, you're a hero. If you're in a conservative Christian crowd, you're the devil. Doesn't get bigger than that in terms of a split. So if that's important to you, if that's how you want to express your artistic gift, your talent, well, you've got to make your way to the Goths and get out of that small town Christian arena where they're going to pray for your soul every time you do a earring or whatever it is. So this is the key to environment. Now, we have heart, mind, and body. This is very important to integrate. On the mental side, one of the things to integrate are values and or ideals. A value is like I desire pleasure. The ideal is, the image you have of the most, pleasurable thing. Everyone values pleasure to some extent. The value is I like to be a good person. The ideal is what? Mother Teresa or whoever it is that you think that's what a good person is. Now, going back to that dynamic, world peace, working in a military, world peace, working in a military factory, you've got low integration between your ideals, and that's going to pull you apart. It's going to weaken you as a person. Now, you can also have weakness between your ideals, meaning you can be evenly divided between, I want to go off to war because it's exciting and romantic. And I feel like I'd be an important person. I feel like a nobody, and this is one of the recruitment bases for some people to enlist in the military. It's like, I just feel insignificant and can't get it together. But I can get myself to the recruitment office, and what I'm wanting is to be somebody. Okay, so you want to be somebody. Okay, but you'd like to be an artist. But there's no recruitment. Our country doesn't value art as much as military technology. And so there's no place at the US government that says, you're 16, you want to be an artist? Take the test, join up. It doesn't exist. So I want to be an artist, and I want to be somebody, but there's no artist recruitment center in this environment, and there is a war recruitment center. So, I'm going to tear myself, but the stronger drive is being somebody. And this is a very significant drive. The need to be significant, to matter. It's one of the most fundamental drives. And you watch some of the disgusting and absurd and self-debasing things that happen on all forms of media. And the question is why? Because it's more fundamental to want to matter, to exist, than it is to exist as a good guy or a bad guy. And there are many people, if they can't matter as a good person, the need to exist will say, okay, what do I have to do? And one of the easiest ways to exist is put a gun to someone's head. So you may look and say, look, I did this and nobody noticed. I did this, nobody noticed. I did this, nobody noticed. I said this, people laughed at me. I did this, I did that. I tried to make a difference here. Nobody listens to my ideas. I told my dad I didn't want to do that. He didn't care. He said I was an idiot. I've tried every fucking possible way to matter. But I'm just $100 away from being the most important person in someone's life. Cock that trigger, and they're going to pay attention. Now, if you fucking assholes can't give me any sense of mattering in any other way, okay, you're the boss. You control the environment. I'm going to matter. And you look at Hitler's art career in that in that context. And we demonize Hitler as the worst person. We don't talk about Genghis Khan or Napoleon or anything. No, Hitler. He didn't matter as an artist. We're still talking about him today. Good job, Hitler. On the agenda of mattering. Bad job, Hitler, on the agenda or the value of creating world peace, beauty, being an artist, all that. Though he did do some fancy drawings, all those ceremonies and swastikas and all that. He got to express his artistic side. And his military was impressed with that. It's like, yes, of course, and Germany needed to matter as well. Because after being left with the debts of the European nation, Germans were eating leather, were eating shoes. Desolation, shame, high debt, inability to eat and all that. And so Germany needed to matter as well. Well, who came around and said, okay, Germany, you can matter this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, and this way? No one. It's like, fuck you, you don't matter. Until they re-erected the military machine. Suddenly, they're the center of the universe again for a few years. And so there's this, and it's very, very important for parents, for governments, for world, people that are looking at world dynamics, which are just bigger, blown up versions of interpersonal and interconversational dynamics. It's very important to understand the need to matter. Because people are going to get it one way or another. You don't get to decide if someone's going to say, okay, fine. You don't want to see me, you don't want to value me, you want me to just be nothing, fine. I'll just do it. I'll just be a nice nothing nobody. It doesn't work that way. People will generally try and please in a positive direction. And when that gets betrayed, slapped down, ignored, humiliated, X hundreds of times, then they turn bad. And suddenly they matter. So they get more bad because they're finally getting what they need. We all need to matter. So we have feelings. I feel bad. I hate going to work. I think I need to go to work to make money, but I hate it, but I think I need to. That's how you divide yourself. When your feelings align with your values, with your activities and all that, obviously, I want to go to work because I like this job and I like what I'm doing and I like it for my values and I like my coworkers and I'm proud of myself and I think we should be working as human beings and I think it's God's will and all that aligns and I have a talent and I have a skill and wow, feelings are a third of who we are and they motivate every single human action. So if you set yourself up to do something, I was just talking with my brother today because he's feeling depressed. And so, I'm offering support. And so we've got to do it in a way that it feels supportive. So I've got to listen to why he doesn't want to do it. He's like, I don't have anything to say. I call up. It seems like we talk for an hour. I just don't call you because I don't have an hour. And I don't want to feel like I'm letting you down. So I said, okay, let's change the pattern. 30-second calls, but let's make them interesting. Call up, leave a message, or talk for 30 seconds about something you like about yourself, or this, that, and the other. It's like, does that address the issue? It's like, every day, what if I'm this? I feel bad. It's like, okay, you've turned that into a problem. Okay, so how about 3 times a week, whenever you feel like it? Like just 30 seconds. Can you manage 90 seconds a week? It's like, oh, he can. So now that integrates. So the feelings go from, oh, I'm going to fail, I'm going to feel bored, I'm going to feel inadequate, I don't have time, this is a burden, so I'm not going to do it. So he doesn't. To moving towards doing it. Because you're respecting the feelings enough to change the environment to learn from them. They're just barometers. It's like if your thermometer out there says it's 92 degrees and you've got lettuces, that just means you got to water them or they're going to die. If your thermometer says it's rapidly dropping below freezing and you have an orange grove, you don't kill the thermometer because it's giving you a bad reading on the orange grove. What orange grove farmer wants to hear it's 28 degrees and falling rapidly, and you've got $1 million out in the field that is going to be dead? Now, you've got 2 responses. You can take a pickaxe to the thermometer and say, solve that problem. Don't you ever tell me it's 28 degrees, and of course, that doesn't affect the temperature. You can take a pickaxe to your feelings. Oh, I feel so depressed. Well, you shouldn't feel depressed, and I feel sad, and go away. We don't want sadness around here, and I feel angry. Well, I don't want to hear any of your anger. Go away. Now let's have a happy relationship. Well, how can you have a happy relationship if you've refused to learn about the 3 core negative energies that are preventing it? Because those feelings don't come out of nowhere. They come out of a complex dynamic that you have to understand. You've got to read the temperature and respond to integrate. Otherwise, feelings are saying this, mind is saying this. You lose either way. You can't move. Environment, just going back to that point, you want to build an environment that supports the person you want to be. It is critical. Absolutely critical. I have 1,000% more quality one-on-one time with Thai people in a month than I do in America in a year. It's because the environment. It's because when I call up people in San Francisco Bay Area and say, hey, you feel like getting together for a few hours this afternoon? Let's go out sailing. Let's do this. They're like, no, I could never do that. You call the next one. I can't talk now. Call me next week. It's like the sailing is over next week. You call up, I don't like sailing. And, okay, you call up the next. You can approach a Thai stranger, man or woman. How would you like to do this? There's a 50% odds as a complete stranger. Their sense of hospitality, their sense of adventure, Their freedom with time, the fact that they don't rank themselves in that culture by how overbusy they are and how overbooked they are. That's what we do here. If you have an appointment that's booked out, if you have a calendar that's booked out 3 months and make worried and frustrated faces every time someone says, "Can I talk with you? Can I see you?" Ooh, let's see. Maybe in March, next year in March, I think we could pencil you in. It's going to be tough, but I'll try and do. Oh, that's an important person in our ranking system. I think it's a bozo who isn't, connected with their rhythm. They can't follow a dream. They can't go out sailing. They can't enjoy the moment because none of that matters. They've got their careful schedule that everything will be ruined if one thing gets growing. And so if I want to be this way, I've got to find an environment. And of course, the ties aren't ranked by how busy they are. They're ranked by their courtesy and their empathy and their responsiveness, as am I when I'm in Thailand. And so I go from being like, who is this unimportant person who has time on their hands? Because that's my biggest, achievement in life, has been to carve out large windows of time so that I can follow flows that are subtle but profound. That's my biggest achievement as a business owner, is to have tons of time, more time than I had, when I was 17 years old and just starting the business. I've got time because I want it. But it's people look at me confused, like, I thought you were intelligent and smart and important. Why do you have time? Because I want it. We've all got 24 hours. And so, finding the environment where that flows, it's easy and it's fun. So it happens 10 times more. Actions. One of the ways, you look, again, in integrity. Someone says, oh, this relationship is really important to me. And it's like, well, how's that? Well, I just said so. It's like, well, you didn't call. You didn't return the call. You didn't write. You didn't visit. You didn't invite. You didn't share anything vulnerable. You didn't suggest a single way to build the relationship. So how important is this? Oh, it's very important. Well, one of the things you have to learn with integrity is this is someone whose words has gotten so far separate from their actions that you can pretty much take whatever they say and assume they will do the exact opposite. And so, but that just means words are meaningless, which means you've got to spend a lot more energy. Words are useful when they are assigned to patterns they actually associate within the dictionary. They're confusing and crazy-making when they are assigned to the exact opposite of the dictionary definition. And so, it's very powerful to integrate words and actions, but the key is focus on what people do. What people do with their time every day, what they do with their money every day, is what they pray to. That's their deity. Someone works 16 hours a day, their deity is work. Period. There's nothing stopping them from stopping all that. There's nothing stopping them traveling overseas and being an English teacher, working 4 hours a day. There's nothing stopping of them scaling down. There's nothing stopping them going into the wilderness and building a tree fort. Nothing. Except they're praying to their deity. Could be social rank, could be money. When you have a Fortune 400 list and you don't have any other list, if you want to be important, that's one of the things you'll default to aim for. Okay, what do I have to do to be important? Okay, do this. Well, how do you do that? Well, you work 80-hour weeks. Okay. So being important may be, the deity, or efficiency, or avoiding feelings may be the deity. You're born into a family, and every time you start talking about this feeling or that feeling, you see complete panic on your traumatized parents' faces because they haven't dealt and integrated their emotions. So they're panicking because you have a feeling and they don't know what to do with it. And so you realize from watching your parents' faces and behaviors for a couple of years that the most important thing in this family is avoiding feelings of any intensity at all costs. Okay, how am I going to do that? Well, the most socially accepted way to do that, if you're a man, is to work your ass off. And it'd be even better if you get on that list. So off you go. Well, if that person says, oh, my family is most important, they may be correct in a roundabout way. Because if in their family system, avoiding intensity of emotions is the single, it's like the golden triangle. It's like we've arrived. We're all going to work together. Nope, a little feeling is appearing there. Go to your room. Don't talk about that. That's not the... Oh, you're having some shame? Let's humiliate you into silence. Oh, finally, there's no more feelings in the immediate vicinity. So if you have that going on, you could be following your family. Your family of origin is the most important thing, making your abusers comfortable in their, in their level of, of vacuous misery. But comfortable, and we like to be comfortable even if we're miserable. We much prefer comfortable misery than uncomfortable pleasure. You just need to watch what people, if you give people choices to be happy or to be normal, and almost everyone will choose normal and unhappy. Why? It's comfortable. So you have that with thoughts, actions, and so you follow the actions. That's the densest thing. If someone says, I love you, and then steals all your money, the words I love you aren't going to have a lot of impact. The fact that all your money's stolen is. So you pay attention to the densest form of energy. Now, actions are the densest form of energy, and they always line up with thoughts and feelings and beliefs. So it doesn't matter what people, they don't always line up with words, particularly in disintegrated environments. So we're in an environment where that's disintegrated. And we can see this with the Hollywood sex scandals in certain ways, mostly focusing on men, because that's where we're swinging as a culture, is to redress the imbalances of women. But if we look at the sex scandal, boys will be taught in all kinds of ways on sitcoms, on movies, and all that if you get lots of girls, you're higher ranking. It's just what we teach in our cult. And so, okay, you get lots of girls, you'll be higher ranking. And they will envy, and talk about wanting to be famous so that they can get lots of girls. Now, they don't go into the details about this. You're able to go from 0 to 20 through college in this cult and not learn a single thing about emotional literacy or successful relationships or empathy or anything useful in that domain. The only thing you learn is you've got to get sex, or you've got to be cool or have money or be up and coming, whatever it is. You learn that you have to do it. You don't learn how to do it. You think algebra is going to help you be polite and make your partner feel comfortable around sex? No. Or how about doctored versions of history? Or home economics? That's bound to help you know what the line is when someone's half drunk laying on your bed and knowing all that. It's like, or no, we don't learn anything useful in that domain other than you've got to get some. So who goes and works the hardest to get some? People who feel insignificant. People, it's like, what do I have to do to be significant? You got to get some. Somehow or other, get it. And don't get caught if there's anything like this. Well, then they do. They work hard. You're supposed to get famous so that you can get some. Okay, you get famous, you get some, and then, you didn't do it in the right way. Well, why didn't you tell me the right way before? Well, you should have known this and that and the other. Well, no, that's kind of different rules seem to apply. She said, fuck her anyway. I wasn't quite, this, that, the other. And I knew I would get some attention next day from the guys and and so how does this integrate? We don't have an integrated culture. And so when you try and meet all the different cultural requirements, you end up feeling a bit crazy. The healthier the culture, the healthier the individual. The more split and divided the culture, the more split and divided the individual. How's a Catholic priest who was sexually abused, who finds himself being a pedophile, And then he's moved off and he doesn't get any help other than pray to God, which doesn't work with sexual addiction, particularly in intergenerational. Like, how's he going to sort that out? I mean, nobody knows. There's not a single person that doesn't know it's wrong. You can get that, but if you're not integrated with your feelings and your thoughts and your feelings in your body, how do you sort that out? We don't teach that. Pray to God. Well, if it worked, 5% of our priests wouldn't be pedophiles. If the Catholic Church was worried about it, other than praying to God, they would have healed their priests. They don't know what they're doing. And other people pay the price. So, goals. Obviously, you can have all this stuff, but if you don't have a goal of going on a boat ride and thus learning the things, like, why would you learn those skills? So you need goals, and you need to integrate those goals with your talent. If Mozart had had the goal of creating the nicest birdhouse at the science fair, he may or may not have succeeded. But you want to try and line that up with the core strengths that you have as a human being. Of course, words, you have words. You say, my goal for the year is this. And then 6 months later, having done absolutely nothing, you say, my goal for the year is this. And another 3 months later, when the year's almost over, my goal is this. Or you stop talking about it by that point because it's pretty obvious you haven't done anything, and that's embarrassing, so you just don't talk about the goal. But you want your words as much as possible to be symbols for your feelings, your thoughts, your intuitions. You want your timeline to be integrated. This is one of the reasons why, the goal work that I've talked about in other areas is important. There's this great Monty Python sketch, and it gets to the point of this, and because the mafia has got this buffoon literally digging to China from England. And they want sponsorships for the tunnel, of course. And so, the sponsors are talking about the tunneling map, how he's going to drill, he's going to tunnel under the English Channel and this and that and work his way down and tunnel all the way to China. And, of course, the interviewer wants to know how far he's got. And, of course, the sponsor doesn't want to, or the promoter doesn't want to talk about that. He's down there agreeing. And finally admits, like, he's 3 feet down on his, 5, or $10,000 journey. He's finally dug 3 feet, but he wants sponsorship for the tunnel, to China, and it's that kind of thing. Well, I'm making progress. Well, what have you done today? Well, I'm making progress. Such as? Well, things. It's like, well, what things? Okay, so you've done this and this and this. Okay, you've done 3 things. How many things do you have to do? 250 things. So you're a little over 1% done yet. Now, when's your deadline? When does it have to be done by? Tomorrow. You got 3 done. There's no integrity. You can't get done by that, and that's one of the things in an efficient culture. And this is one of the things we mean about integrity. And so. And we over-focus in some ways on arbitrary timelines. You said it would be done by then, and it's not, even when that timeline is irrelevant. That's one thing we pay attention to. We don't pay any attention, and that's something to learn about the integrity of our culture, because almost no one in this culture will ever ask or take any steps to learn what your talent is. 0. So there's very low talent integrity in our culture. Maybe a few geniuses where they get discovered by mistake or this, that, and the other, but very, very, very little awareness. If you ask the U.S. government, who are the most talented people to listen and understand emotional language in the country, they can't point to them because they don't ask. They don't investigate. They don't even send out a census. We'd like to know our people. Who's good at this? Who's good at this? Who's good at this? Who's got a budding ability? Nobody knows because nobody asks. But then you go to this other area of integrity. When will this be done by? It'll be done by 3 p.m. Why isn't it done at 3 p.m.? That area we're really focused on. And yet, it's an interesting juxtaposition. Because if Mozart isn't done with his bird feeder by 3 p.m., that's not the biggest thing to be worried about. The biggest thing to be worried about is what the hell is Mozart doing building bird feeders when he's asked for a piano? That's criminal. An hour late on the bird feeder, who cares? The birds can wait, you see. And so what we see is that we focus not on the areas of integrity that are most important, but on the areas of integrity that are most normal to focus on. And that's one of the reasons we need a map through integrity. So we also have integrity with law. Now, every government in the world that I'm aware of has a monopoly on force, which is a monopoly on trauma. Meaning you go out and start shooting people because you don't like them, or they didn't agree with your rules, or they didn't do what they said they would do. And you're thrown in jail and they're protected. But the government comes and steals your house or throws you in jail or shoots you down. Like, you can think of the David Koresh shootings, with Janet Reno, firebombing citizens because what? They weren't doing exactly what they were told. It's a monopoly on power, a monopoly on force, a monopoly on murder. If you're doing it for your country, you can drop bombs on innocent people. You're doing it on your own, you're a murderer. So it's a monopoly on trauma and violence. Well, one of the deepest needs every citizen has, every individual has, is to survive and to feel secure in that survival and to have a sense of love and belonging. Well, we also need to move towards our ideals. All of us, having met the need to, for love and belonging, for a sense of self-esteem, start dreaming of our ideals and our values. When our ideals and our value, for example, I'm going head-to-head with my local government around homelessness, because in my ideal, I go to Thailand and I see that there are no homeless people, because the Thai government does not prevent its citizens from putting up a tin shack on their own land. My government prevents Americans from putting up a tin shack on their land. I am forbidden. For example, I own some land and I was exploring just, what can I do with it? I am forbidden to do anything on my land without a 3-year, $30,000 permit process. And they are going to dictate what I can build. I mean, it's not that they're going to limit it. They're actually going to dictate. They're going to say, no, this has to be done this way. It's like my engineer says it could be done this way. It's like, we don't care. This is how it has to be done. It's like the neighbors don't mind. We don't care. Well, I could save money if I did it this way. We don't care. Well, I don't need 1,200 square feet. It's just me. I'd like to build a tiny house. We don't care. You're going to build a $600,000 unit on this property the way you are told to build, or you are not building, period. Now, surprise, surprise, we have homelessness. What? Those homeless people, the thousands of people wandering around in a very wealthy county, can't pay the $600,000. So they're hunted by the police. I don't agree. So you have a situation where the ideals and values go against the law. In an imbalance of power that threatens trauma. Because when you get personal with battles with the mayor and all that, they've got control of the police. And you've got to wonder if and when, to what extent, They're going to protect your right to do business, etc., and simultaneously fight a monopoly power structure that doesn't benefit anyone, by the way. I mean, they've done studies that show that we, the taxpayer, pay $40,000 in my county for every homeless person in ER visits, in policing, in renovating parks, and in a variety of crisis management modes, but we don't spend a penny housing them. So the crisis continues at a more expensive rate per. So it's bizarre. You can't build you can't build anything under $600,000. You can't do anything you want on your own land. You can't do other things on other people's land, even if they could let you build a little hut there. You can't do it. Why? It's crazy. So, but then when the courts are also controlled to a certain degree by local governments, can you challenge insane and abusive practices of your government in the courts? Usually the government writes the law. You can't challenge the government. You can challenge everyone else, but not us, because we're writing the law. Why would we want you to have the right to challenge us? So the law is a very big integrating and disintegrating, because the part of you that wants to survive and be welcome and feel loved and belong in your surroundings doesn't want to fight a monopoly on power. But if your values pull you in that direction, it's going to split you. You're going to be weaker than if your law supports you. Like, we could have a law against corrupt, illegal, inefficient government practices where there's no clear, in John Doerr's words, OKRs. And that's a great book, Measure What Matters. We could say that any government that doesn't use OKRs is wasting public money, and so they should be sued and forced to provide efficient uses of public money, like a well-run company. Or you can protect the government from those laws, but you have an aspect of integrity. You have health and healing. That, you have something like, this is the right thing to do, but it may get you killed. I want to be healthy, but I want to do the right thing to do. When I go to volunteer in Haiti in the middle of a tornado or a hurricane, it's the right thing to do, but I could get blown up in a hurricane, or you could crash the plane or whatever. And so there's this tension between health and healing and some of these values. And obviously, how do you bring it together and assess what's the right risk level? Because if you elevate this too high, you don't even leave the house, because you could get hit by a car. You could be shot down by a random shooter. In fact, maybe you should dig a basement and never leave the basement, because what if an earthquake or this and that happened? And so, how do we integrate this tension between health so that, on the one hand, we're not going so far that we kill ourselves so that we can't embody our values because we're dead. And on the other hand, we're so worried about health and safety that we don't embody any values because we don't leave the house. So there's a balance point. There's, of course, money. It's like there's this classic idealist challenge where I want to be a painter, but where's the money going to come from? And so if you can integrate a source of money, you're going to have more integrity than if you have because you're in an environment where people do not value you as much as your money. That's the only. There are millions of American homeless. Why? Because they don't have money. It's not because they're bad people. It's not because they're unworthy of love. It's not because they were born insane. No, they don't have money. And so they are treated like second-class citizens. Well, do you want to be treated that way? Well, then you got to have money. But then to get money, people have to pay you. Well, what are they going to pay you for? Well, they're going to pay you for what they value, not what you value. Like, I've filled my house up with crystal sculptures because I find them so beautiful. They touch me on so many levels. To me, that's my greatest art in the world. There hasn't been a single buyer in 5 years for what I value. Meanwhile, I make tons of money doing things that other people value. They like very traditional, ordinary things, and they are very impressed when I give it to them, on time and on budget. That's what they want. That's what I give them. So there's this tension. Obviously, I would be more integrated if I could find an environment where I could talk to growing, budding, dynamic, 10x thinking students and engineers and artists, where I could make art that expressed my soul, that I could do this, and that I made tons of money and was honored for this. That's a more integrating environment than saying, okay, I'm going to do this in my spare time and my art in my spare time because I'm in an environment that does not see or appreciate who I am in the talent areas. You know, it's so there's a disintegration. It's a painful disintegration. You know, one of the maps I did was on suicide, and that's part of that's a part of me that wants to die because it hasn't found a home in this cult of a culture. I understand that. It's very hard. Every part of the human psyche has the need for survival, security of survival, love, and belonging. There are big parts of my psyche that have none of those. It's uncertain if they will survive. They are not loved and have no home. And I give them little tatters of a home with my money and my space. And other people say, oh, that's nice, but we don't have time for that. We're busy with our rat race. And so that bit doesn't blossom. And there's a deep grief there. As opposed to that exact same domain in the psyche filled with joy, filled with passion. That yes, you have a home. What you most love to do is welcome. What if Mozart had played and been in ecstasy and people had said, get that sound out of the way and go out and put rocks in the, build the wall and this and that and the other. We don't have time for this thing and we need that violin for firewood. It's understandable. And some part of Mozart would die. Some part of Mozart would be in pain because the talent is not allowed for, is not welcome. And it's one of the reasons I've developed the 10x living framework to try and create a plateau in which more of our talents as individuals would have a home. It's incredibly important to curate an environment in which talent, which is the language of the soul, that which moves us, has a place of honor rather than being banished to provide for more base needs of security, survival, etc. Sex. It's one of the drives. Can you integrate the drive with your values, your ideas, your words, your goals, your dreams, or does it destroy those goals, etc.? And that's part of the challenge, is to include sex in the framework. Say that, yes, sex is important. And so creating an environment that facilitates that is important. And doing so in a way that doesn't hurt other people is important. So we're going to, so it's an integration or a disintegration process. This is, again, where you have the Catholic priests. You have a drive of sex, and then they put you in an environment of no sex. And so to survive in your role, you've got to be secret. Well, who's the most reliable source of secrecy? And mea culpa maxima, they didn't only they targeted boys because they were more shy and embarrassed about abuse than girls. So boys over girls were more secret. And then deaf boys in boarding schools were more silent and secret than people seeing their parents every day. And so, some of the deepest wounds and the deepest violations were the male priests targeting deaf, boarding, male parishioners as the best way to keep the secret. Devastating these people's lives to meet their drive in a secret way that would protect their role. This is where a religion disintegrates from its humanity. So it's, when you create a structure that is disintegrated, you disintegrate the people. So they're a priest by day and a pedophile and criminal by night. Priest by day, pedophile and criminal by night. That's not healthy. They're not strong. They can't be strong in their faith. How can you communicate a faith that you can't keep yourself? So their faith weakens. They are the most cynical people of their parish because they know that with all their praying, they couldn't stop themselves sexually abusing the most innocent people in the whole community. And so when their parishioners say, oh, God appointed you, because that's what the priest says, the priest says, God must be a complete fucked up idiot to appoint me, because I'm the worst of the lot. So the priest becomes the most divided spiritually of the whole flock. That doesn't work. How do you integrate all that? How do you find the dance? Or how do you integrate the fact that you ejaculate or orgasm rapidly when imagining something dangerous, like a rape scene? But you think that scene is bad, and you think you should be focusing on your wife. So I can't have an orgasm without thinking about some sexual fantasy that has violence. So in order to have sex with my wife, I need to think about something violent, or I don't get an erection. So then I don't have sex with my wife, and I think I should be having sex with my wife because she likes it so much. But I don't feel it's respectful of, the marriage and stuff to be having my mind separate from my body because I'm not here. I'm not integrated. And then what's worse, telling my wife about this so that there's no secrecy, and then we're living, and then we're dealing with what's worse? Not telling and pretending, telling, not, so all of these are levels of integration. Do you integrate words and thoughts? Do you integrate words and feelings? Do you integrate words and actions? How do you address disintegration, where the sexual template has an element of adrenaline and violence, and the sexual ideal predominates with tenderness and nurturing love? How do you integrate that in your body? That's a journey that determines how much sex pulls you apart and how much sex pulls you together. It's one of the reasons I made a whole map on sexuality. Then there's giving. It's a dimension of integration. If you give, is your gift received? If someone else gifts, do you receive their gift? Is there a connection there, or is there a disintegration? You have that a lot with, for example, attraction. I love you, meaning I want to have sex with you. Well, I'm disgusted by that idea. Go away. It's like that doesn't integrate, does it? So how does that resolve? You have the integration of love in what I just talked about. How can I say that I need you and I love you and I want you? But what you say is, if you don't do this and this and this, your life is going to fall apart. And I don't want your life to fall apart, but I want your time and attention. But if you give me your time and attention, your life will fall apart. How do I integrate that? What is love? And so I've explored that as an important map, different faces of love. I wrote one book, Faces of Love. But also the hierarchy of different loves through the brain stem up to the most transcendent areas of the brain. The child's love is I need you. Fight, flight, freeze. You're keeping me alive. You're giving me what I need. I want you and I need you. It's a relationship of attachment. I'm attached to you and I want you to meet my needs. So that's a child's love. It's a form of love. It's part of any meaningful romantic mix. If your partner doesn't feel any need, want at all, it's not a passionate relationship. On the other hand, if it's all about I need you and fuck all, fuck your goals, fuck your friends, I don't care about that. I want you the way I want you now. And that's it. I mean, there's no regard for health, safety, reputation, money, career, any of that. That's out the window. It's 100% in the child's domain. So I'm attached to you to survive. Or I lust after you, moving more into the adolescent domain. I lust after you. Don't you get it? I can't live without you. I need you. Well, I've got to do my homework and then I've got to go do this. I don't care about any of that. I need you. Well, I can't stand it. I'll kill myself. There's an adolescent's relationship with lust. So you've got attachment, you've got lust, and then you've got this companionship element. And it's again, well, I enjoy your company. Well, I don't enjoy your company. Well, but I enjoy it. I want to be near you. Well, yeah, but I'm more interested in this other thing. Again, we have a self-centered focus. The only area, I love, I need, I want. The area where it first begins to turn outwards is I want to be loving. See, that's the first bit that isn't about me. It goes back to independence. If you don't have independence, if you didn't get love from your parents, you didn't get love from your teachers, and you were bullied at school, and so you haven't met Maslow's third need, love and belonging. It's starving in there. Well, what that creates is desperately needy people. It's not that they were born that way. They were born healthy. We all have human needs. When the needs are not met, it's the same like starving someone for oxygen. And believe me, if you cover one nostril and cover up the mouth, and you give people, 10 years where they can barely keep their body alive with oxygen, and then you open up their mouth for the first time, they're going to be desperate to breathe. If you starve people half to death, they're going to be desperate to eat. If you sleep deprive them, they're going to fall asleep whether you want them or not. You don't bypass needs. That's the thing that defines needs. You meet them, and when you meet them independently and fully, then you can afford to give other people their space and independence. So, we raise malnourished, unloved people, and then they're needy, and that's a self-centered need, naturally. The mature love